Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. I have got a very special guest joining us today to discuss all of the madness that is ongoing in the UK, from Epstein ambassadors to pro-Palestine protesters, disabled old blind people getting arrested in the streets, to whatever is going on with Tommy Robinson, because I still struggle to understand who this guy is and what his handlers' goals are for him. So joining me today on our episode is Mohammed Akunjee. He is a British attorney. He's a criminal law and human rights attorney and political commentator. Mohammed, thank you so much for joining me today. How you doing?
Very well. The pleasure is entirely mine. Thank you.
I want to start off by asking you about these what I assume are Palestine Action related protesters that are getting arrested, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. For starters, is there any legal recourse for them, or are they just going to get thrown the book? What's happening here?
So it's an interesting situation. So in the UK, we after 9/11, we passed a law called the Terrorism Act 2000. And within the detail of that legislation, it allowed the Home Secretary, which is a political appointment in the UK, to put a organization onto what's known as a prescribed list. And the minute you're on that list, anyone who shows support of that organization is by definition committing a terrorism-related criminal offense. And that can attract up to 14 years in custody just by showing support. Now, previously you had, Al-Qaeda or the IRA and things like, pretty obvious terrorist organizations on those lists. But PAL Action itself is an organization that avoids any sort of violence towards people. It only damages property, and particularly it targets Elbit Systems, which is a company that produces weapons for Israel. It's an Israel-based company, but it has factories in the UK. Now, for reasons best known to the Home Secretary, probably political ones, this year they put PAL Action on that list, and as a response to that, quite a lot of pro-Palestinian activists have decided that they're going to club together and show actual support for PAL Action, knowing that this will break the law and that they'll be arrested. Now, the first grouping of these activists, I think, had 500 odd arrests. We've had hundreds and hundreds more now. But every time they get arrested, I don't think anyone, or maybe one person, has been charged. Many have been arrested and nothing's actually happened with them. They're just ongoing investigations. So the idea is, I guess, from the process point of view, is that the more and more people that are arrested, then it'll clog up the legal system and we get the most ridiculous scenarios. We have octogenarian priests who are being arrested repeatedly, twice now, this brave lady. And then we also have a blind wheelchair gentleman who's been also arrested as well. So effectively it's to show the absurdity of law, where actually in the UK, I think for the first time ever, we've reached sort of, something that might annoy Jordan Peterson, which is an equality of outcome. We've got more white people arrested for terrorism in the UK than ever before. And so, maybe a leaf has been taken out of the good professor's book.
It's one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. So you're saying, like in the United States, if you get arrested for terrorism, you would have had to have provided material support for a terrorist organization, kind of a vague verbiage, but the case law is like, if you give money, if you, I don't know, something like that, you're actively, you're giving them intelligence, but this just seems like if you wear a t-shirt, I'm seeing people, 80-year-olds, as you mentioned, getting arrested.
You can hold a placard, you can just say words of support for a prescribed organization, and that in itself is, is breaching the criminal law and labeling you as a terrorist, basically, to do so. It's the words themselves of support. So we, unfortunately, you guys are a bit ahead of us. You had a bit of a revolution, you got yourselves a constitution. We here are still subjects, so we don't have a constitution, we don't have the constitutional right to free speech. We've got ideas of freedom of assembly that were given to us by the Human Rights Act, but the idea of free speech is something that we actually give lip service to the UK has a great history of arresting people for saying things on Twitter, or X as now known. And I would say that our free speech is probably as curtailed as anything in China at the moment.
And so they're arresting all of these people right now, and at the same time, they're allowing the Israeli President Herzog to come and visit 10 Downing Street. I mean, do the average British people who are maybe not so political, not going to these protests, are they beginning to question the lunacy of this all?
I have to say, it's been a long time since I've been in tune with the average Brit. And I think that's mainly because I read the newspaper every day. And if you do, you start losing your mind. You start thinking that you've fallen down a rabbit hole into an alternate universe. You're exactly right. We have Herzog, who by any accounts is leading the charge on genocidal mania in Israel, being invited over to the UK. He did get a bit of a roasting at Chatham House, which is one of our think tanks. He was introduced in a very prickly way. But just before that happened, the UK declared that there is no genocide going on in Gaza, and I imagine that was done to politically foreshadow the allowing of Herzog to come in. So we've gone completely down the rabbit hole here, where we have priests in their 80s and blind people in wheelchairs being arrested for words that are designed, in essence, to protest a genocide, and then the perpetrators of genocide are being lauded and given fanfare all around the streets of London. So, there's a Mr. Man book, I think it's called Upside Down World, and I think I've fallen into that with the rest of us.
And if I understand correctly, the UK is not just, involved in this genocide by hosting Israeli war companies and hosting the president of Israel, but they're actively engaged in flyover campaigns, intelligence from their military base in Cyprus, correct?
Yeah, it's Akrotiri, the base. So we have regular flights that are buzzing around over Palestine, and our government has admitted that they're sharing information from those flights with the Israelis. Now, what they claim is that those flights are gathering information to do with hostages that have been taken. But that's simply unsupportable by the fact that you have, by Israel's own account and Hamas's own account, they have tunnels underground. So what flights can do with respect to helping the hostages who are underground is a new form of technology on me.
Yeah, no, it makes no. Obviously, they're just using that to kill innocent people. Is there anyone in the British Parliament? I know George Galloway is no longer there, unfortunately, but is there anyone in the British Parliament who is calling this out to the degree of what it really is? I mean, it's the Prime Minister and his entire government complicit in not just war crimes, but genocide.
You have Jeremy Corbyn, who was until fairly recently a leader of the Labour Party himself, and is now an independent, having been thrown out of the Labour Party. He's very vocal on it. Zara Sultana, again, recently resigned from the Labour Party. She has been very vocal on the issue of these matters in Parliament. It doesn't get the airing that you'd hope, but you would have thought that something as fundamental as mass murder and genocide, you would have got a lot more pushback from over 600 parliamentarians, but they are not pushing back. They've all been co-opted into this pro-Israel narrative.
And did I see correctly that Jeremy Corbyn is now trying to start a new political party? Is that true?
He is, yes. He and Zara Sultana are trying to put together what's at the moment named Your Party. And hopefully that will get more traction and registration in due course. It's had a huge amount of support in terms of declared sign-up membership. I think it's over 750,000 people in a very short period of time. So there is a support base out there, and a significant one. The problem is that support, the British public, I think 75% of the British public were in favour of a ceasefire only even a year ago. But none of that support, none of that will was translated through their elected representatives into anything meaningful in Parliament. In fact, where the membership in the Labour Party vocalised their antipathy towards this genocide, they were kicked out of the Labour Party, engineered out. So you've got this very, frankly, corrupt system in Parliament, whereby lobbyists and special interests can purchase the vote and the vocal cords of MPs who will stand against the will of their own constituents.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just left wondering, I mean, you have Jeremy Corbyn, who has obviously a massive following, huge popularity, not just in the UK, but internationally. What prevents someone like Jeremy Corbyn from uniting with other anti-imperialist figures like George Galloway, as I mentioned, who already has a party in the UK?
Sure. I mean, there are tensions that exist within what is a broad church, which is the left, as to what are the important issues. And identity politics forms quite a strong part of that, and particularly the trans issue, which frankly most of the public don't care about. But when you get into the broad church of the left, there are some very strong feelings pro and against on those matters. So the priority of what's important, what isn't, is Gaza the most important thing? Is an identity politics the most important thing? Different people have different views, and that will need to be thrashed out and put to a vote, frankly, about what is important and what the priority of importance is when it comes to creating a party on the left, because there isn't one, frankly, at the moment.
Mm-hmm. The UK has also promised to recognize Palestinian statehood at the September UN General Assembly meeting. What do you make of this? Does it have any bearing on the actual lives of people living in Gaza or the West Bank right now?
Yeah, I mean, any time we see a political or a legal maneuver that's meant to be in favor of the Palestinians is completely devoid of any practical meaning. And at the end of the day, it requires money, and it requires the force of arms behind anything practical happening. Now, we have people who are starving. And even the most hardcore, ardent, pro-Zionist genocide scholar, there are none left who won't admit that this is a genocide. There's not a single one. All of them, without exception, accept that what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. And in the middle of that, apparently it's beyond the wit of any country to get food, water into Gaza. It's beyond the wit of anyone to somehow put a barrier to Israel continuing what it's doing. And it's beyond the wit of the premier superpower in the world, the United States, to stop sending weapons there. It's not even a question of doing anything. If we all just sat on our hands, Israel would not be able to do what it's doing, because 80% of its weapons are produced outside of its borders, which means the only way it can carry on doing what it's doing is if people are feeding it, the US, Germany, to a lesser extent the UK, keep feeding it the weapons and munitions to murder people. We're not asking our politicians to do anything apart from just stop what you're doing at the moment.
Over the past few weeks and months, we've seen a growing tide in Europe shifting towards further sanctions or arms embargoes against the Zionist entity. Of course, some of these have been a bit, as you just put it, fraudulent. Like in the case of Germany, they said something. It's not even official law. They just said, we're not going to send weapons to Israel that can be used in Gaza, whatever that means. But do you think that sort of domino effect could potentially make its way into the UK government, and there could be policy change there? Do you think it needs to be an entirely different government? This one is not capable of making any steps in the correct direction.
I'm not sure that our current cohort, or maybe even the US cohort, are capable of taking any steps in that direction. I mean, you saw with Donald Trump, he presided over a massive split in the MAGA movement. Now, no sensible politician will ever let that happen, particularly for the benefit of a very unpopular, criminal grouping called Israel outside of their country. It doesn't make any sense. So whatever it is that the pressures are being brought to bear on the politicians of the United States, the same pressures are being brought to bear on the politicians of the United Kingdom. And maybe, in this little bracket of time, we've seen some of what that pressure may look like, in the personage of, Peter Mandelson and his association with Jeffrey Epstein. So I think that's one of the major scalps that have been taken is Mandelson, because of really rather seedy, and suggestive emails between them. But I'm not sure whether that was a leak that was designed to be positive, as in morally positive, or if it was now designed in a very cynical way to create cover and distraction from something as important as, Israel attacking Qatar.
Yeah, it is. What were you going to say?
No, I was only going to say that, the attack on Qatar would have taken months of planning, and the execution of one of timing is just pulling the trigger. So when you look at the time frame of these things, one has to wonder, how is it so much has happened in just a few days, basically?
I'm left wondering how did Israeli, fighter jets fly to, or presumably even, around the border of Qatar, small country, and they had refueling, I would imagine, and no other country claims to have picked that up on their radar or notified Qatar beforehand. Do you think that's possible?
I mean, the only reason they could do it with Iran was because they'd knocked out all of the radar eyes of Syria. So I'm not sure the route that they've taken, but Qatar is a country which has a hub airport. It's got a special skill when it comes to looking into the skies and tracking planes. So it is incredibly curious that a country with such a developed aviation, even a civilian aviation force, was entirely blinded by this maneuver. But I'm not a military expert. I don't know the route that the planes took or the technology around tracking them. I would imagine that there would be some ways for them to avoid civilian radar, but certainly the US didn't help.
Going back to what you said a moment ago about Lord Mandelson, in America, the whole Epstein story, in tandem with Russiagate, I think started it, and then COVID for a lot of people, it kind of broke people's brains and made them start to question a lot of things, question virtually everything that has been told to us. And I would say that I'm definitely party to that group, that the Epstein story was like, wow, crazy Alex Jones was right. Yeah. Do you think in the UK that this story with, your ambassador to the United States, a lord, is going to potentially have some sort of a similar effect?
I think the UK has been a lot more sensitive to the Epstein affair than the United States have been, in terms of actual heads rolling. So we had Prince Andrew, who ended up, very publicly humiliated with his association with Epstein, and ended up paying $12 million, I think, to the victim of his liaisons. And now we've got Mandelson. So I think there's other issues in terms of what may be coming on the horizon. We have our Prime Minister, who had an amount of his personal property, a house that was associated with him, and a car that was set fire to by 3 individuals, Ukrainian rent boys, who were on Grindr, and now they're arrested. We have yet to hear what it is that motivated them to try and set fire to his personal property. So I think we've got a large number of scandals that are probably on the horizon, all of which are utterly bizarre, and you wouldn't have thought of as possible within a month of Sundays 15 years ago. But
I haven't heard that story. What happened with the Ukrainians?
Yeah, there was 3 Ukrainian gentlemen have been arrested for their involvement with an arson attack on trying to set fire to a car that once belonged to Keir Starmer, and one of his properties. So
what?
Yeah.
Well, did that happen recently?
Some months ago, yes. We're waiting. There's a trial date set sometime next year.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, very odd stories to say the least. Another odd story is that of Tommy Robinson, who I read about, your personal trials against him and what he's done, what he represents. But help me understand, because in America, our alt-right, as they call it, is fiercely either anti-Zionist or anti-Semitic. You get one or the other. And it's a very odd phenomena that you have not only Tommy Robinson himself, but so many people seemingly that rally behind him, where you have an alt-right figure, but he's like draping himself in the Zionist flag. What is going on here?
Just money, really. He gets a lot of funding from Canada into the rebel media and associated other Canadians who are pro-Zionist. He has had funding in the past from think tanks funded by pro-Zionists from the United States. And so, however much he gets locked up or arrested for various crimes, he gets an injection of funding and support. And at the moment, he's got a lot of, at least on the face of it, a lot of public support from Elon Musk, one of the richest men on the planet. So when you've got backing like that, then you will be something of a fixture. And he is very pro-Zionist. He's quite open about it. He specifically is anti-Islam. But his appeal comes from the fact that the UK has simply lost any idea of what its identity is. And it is true that, the indigenous, white men, particularly in the UK, have been left out in the cold by successive governments and politicians. They're just not interested in their problems. So in this vacuum, various different groups can come in, and we've had some very hardcore alt-right paramilitary groups come in the past, but they haven't been particularly well funded, because the closer you are to, appearing like a Nazi, the UK still is anti-Nazi. But all of a sudden, you have Tommy Robinson about 10 years ago step into the arena and present in a way that was appealing to angry young men, as in he comes from a football hooligan background, but also has been well trained enough to know how to speak in the public realm. He doesn't quite pass the middle class or dinner table test, but he's certainly speaking to a vacuum which is yet to be filled, and Zionist funding through him has helped him fill that vacuum to a degree.
Well, it's very troubling. I was, disgusted to see Elon Musk providing his support to that, but given his trips to Israel and his tours with Ben Shapiro, I can't say I was that surprised. So, Mohammed, thank you so much for joining me today. Where's the best place for people to follow along if they want to stay up to date with your work moving forward?
Well, I'm usually on X, causing some trouble and embarrassing myself as well in the process. So it's at Mohammed Akunjee on X, and you can come and comment.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Pleasure's mine.